There are also a few pleas regarding the developments in the run-up to the clashes and during the clashes that have reached the courts. For example, there is a plea seeking filing of FIR against hate speeches that have been made by a few BJP leaders this month, including the one by Kapil Mishra, just as tension had begun to build up in northeast Delhi. But the Delhi High Court, viewers, today adjourned the case, giving the police and the centre 4 weeks. Now, while during the hearing of this case, we told you yesterday what happened and some very, very stringent observations that were made by the justice who was hearing the case yesterday. Today, the court said, take a conscious decision on registration of filing an FIR. While the Solicitor General told the court that the situation is not conducive for registration of FIR right now, that we need more time to take appropriate action. This is Solicitor General Tushar Mehta speaking on behalf of the police as well, saying that the police is going through the videos, but right now is not the time to take any action. Right now is not the time to file FIRs. The hearing has now been adjourned for a week. This development comes in the background of what Congress party, in fact, Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who will be joining me just a minute from now, wrote about, where he said that our court system is not in good health. He spoke about larger issues, about the infrastructure of our trial courts being inadequate. And then he dwelled a little bit about adjournments and how adjournments can make or destroy a case, and that there is a tendency to decide hard questions by adjourning cases. So let me in fact just go across to him first and say good evening to Dr. Singhvi. Dr. Singhvi, what you wrote, and what we all read in the paper today is, quite timely considering what we saw even in the court today. Now, if I can ask you to elaborate a little bit more on that comment that you made about how hard questions and decisions are being made via adjournments. If you can elaborate on that.
Let me make one thing clear, and I'm glad you are giving me this opportunity. It was a pure coincidence because what you saw today in the Times of India was an article really excerpted from my forthcoming book, which I have in my hand now, From the Trenches, which is virtually released this week and will be released formally next month. But to cut a long story short, I have addressed several issues in that article, which have been kind of serialized in the Times of India. One is the scourge of delays, the beating the backlog. The second is, I think, and I hate to say it, but I think a declining level of scholarship in the court. The third is not addressing the hard issues and maybe subconsciously or consciously avoiding them. Adjournment is one method. And I certainly am not speaking about today's hearing. I'm certainly not speaking about a particular hearing because this is obviously written earlier. It is published. And fourthly, taking up issues in PIL which sometimes leave the persons concerned remediless. These are 4 out of many other issues which I've discussed in a particular article in the book, From the Trenches. But on the first part, I would like to say that a court has to take a binary call sometimes. It's a black and white call. Now, life is grey. Life is not black and white. There are huge shades of grey. But the court, unfortunately, has got the headache to take that call. And they should take that call ultimately, otherwise not take up the matter at all. If a matter is taken up by a court, it must be pushed to its shortest logical black and white binary conclusion, rather than kind of discussing it in open court on a platform, having it reported, having it misreported, having it understood, having it misunderstood, and let the Ganges flowing by under it. Now, I am not speaking about any particular case. I am not speaking about any particular decision or bench. I am speaking institutionally. Either don't take it up or take it to a conclusion and take it to a conclusion as short as possible time. it's no point sermonizing about something after the event is over, when your writ is fruitless, when the impact is zero.
I just want to also read out for our viewers, an excerpt which obviously has now come in the papers today and will be in your book. The Supreme Court in the past few years in matters where there are great stakes involved has shown a reluctance to act against the government. In another part, you write, when a court says that it will not hear the matter for the next 3 weeks, there is always the potential for the forest to be absolutely destroyed before the court even adjudicates the question. Where the clock is ticking against a party, the court should be conscious and alert to the fact that those questions must be absolutely decided immediately. Mr. Singhvi, now I am going to link the two and ask you if you believe this is also applicable to the case that was up in front of the court today regarding filing of FIRs in certain hate speech cases.
Well, I think it's unfair. It's unfair to link an article ex post facto on events which have occurred subsequent, because these were not present to my mind when I wrote it.
Absolutely.
So that part can be left out. The point remains. I made an institutional point. I made a long-term point. I made a structural point. I made a reform point. I am standing by my point, but I think it's not right to link it. But however, I try never to avoid questions. You are asking about today's event. I can say very frankly that it doesn't matter which side the court decides. Let's get that clear. I'm not speaking of the merits. I'm not even speaking of the politics of it. But it is important that the court decides.
Correct.
And now I'm speaking about today's event. Now, if the court is to give some relief of any kind, then it has to take a binary decision. I'm saying it with the consciousness that it's not easy to take black and white decisions because life is grey. But then the court has to say, look, would the registration of FIRs serve the purpose, send a message, be a deterrent, and will it control, subdue, reduce, etc. this issue? In which case, it's better to do it today rather than tomorrow. It's better to do it today and tomorrow rather than 1 week later. Or it has to take a decision that, look, we don't think that the situation calls for registration of FIRs. We think that the police is well equipped to deal with it. They need more investigation. Prima facie, there is no offense. Now, I'm giving examples. Now, we are talking institutional. We're not talking politics at the moment. Now, institutionally, doing neither doesn't serve the purpose.
Let me ask you a larger question. Do you also believe that when such repeated adjournments take place and a long period of time is, put in, that also adds to the burden and pendency of cases?
Obviously, certainly, absolutely. Repeated adjournments obviously keep the pot boiling. They may make for good headlines, they may make for good reportage, but just imagine, each time I adjourn a case, my next date will be filled up not with 50, but with 75 cases because I've adjourned 25 from the last time. It's much better to take up just 25 and dispose them off rather than to keep giving dates. Now, I understand not all cases are disposable on 1 or 2 dates, but you have to be focused on that binary decision making. Otherwise, don't allow it to be taken up easily. A PIL does not have to be taken up in every case. Where you are taking it up, the obvious object has to be to do palliative, immediate, remedial measures. Otherwise, why take it up? I've also mentioned in part of the book that there is a tendency with bona fides, I'm not talking of malafides, I'm not talking of motivational, but the climate is such, and it's quite obvious, and we are linking it now to current events for which this article was not written, but yes, events earlier have happened. The government, in some sense or the other, along with some wrong decisions of the collegium, has been able to send a message. You should be careful, you should be within line, you can be transferred, you can be, your elevation can be delayed at least, your promotion to the Supreme Court be heavily delayed, and time matters all in this because you have 1 or 2 years and a 6-month delay can be fatal. Well, this message appears to have gone home so that when push comes to shove, see 95% or 90% of cases are simple, binary, bilateral, private disputes, right, or government and private disputes which don't have a push comes to shove element. But when push comes to shove element is there, when the stakes are heavy, when the fiber is to be very strong, then if you have this climate of fear and intimidation and self-doubt and a climate of suspicion and a climate of a certain amount of vendetta, then obviously people take the easy way out. So would you if you were a judge. You have a family, you have a house, you have a life. Why should you get into it? Not that you are agreeing or disagreeing with me, but you just take the easy way out.
Okay.
That is happening in another class of cases, which I've addressed in this case.
Well,
in this book, sorry.
I would for sure look forward to reading it. Because you raised the issue of also transfers, Mr. Singhvi, is it fair to raise a controversy over the transfer of the Delhi High Court judge to the Punjab and Haryana High Court when the collegium itself had already recommended so 2 weeks ago? The timing just matched with this.
I have openly tweeted about it today. I made 5 tweets. If you read them, you'll get your answer. Point number 1, I am critical of the collegium in my first tweet. Just a few months ago, a different collegium, it is well known, did not allow a similar proposal to transfer the same judge to fructify. How does it change in a few months? Simple question. 2, I have said that since the incumbent Chief Justice in the other High Court has many years to go, so long as the incumbent Chief Justice remains there, and he has every right to remain there, this transferee judge is not being promoted. The Delhi transferee judge is being continued to be made number 2 there. Number 3, that Chief Justice cannot be guaranteed or cannot ask for and cannot be assumed to be shortly promoted to the Supreme Court. If that was the intention, he should first have been promoted and then this Judge, Murlidhar Justice, should have been transferred there. Fourthly, I think anybody who knows the bar, who practices in the bar, knows that this gentleman is one of the finest, open, bold, erudite, hardworking, straightforward, simple judge. I don't think any camp, irrespective of ideology, irrespective of agreeing with him or not, has any doubt about that. So what is the message you are sending? And then last but not the least is a point about the executive. There are points about the collegium, but there is a point about the executive. Have you ever heard, I've asked in my tweet, any judge who is under transfer to be told by a notification yesterday, bang in the middle of the case he's hearing, this is a notification by the government, that he shall assume, directed to assume charge in the place of his transfer. Exact words, quote unquote, directed to assume charge.
Right, Mr. Singhvi, thank you so much.
I'd like to see how many High Court transfers have been made like this.
I get the point
and
that
I
you're
say
making.
Lastly, that you, the collegium, have become the protectors. You, the collegium, have become the protectors of appointment and transfer. Well, you have to protect your flock. You are the protectors, you have taken that power, you jolly well have to discharge that duty. Power comes with the duty, responsibility and power comes with accountability.
I take the point that you're making, Mr. Singhvi. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and making those very interesting points on both of the two big stories that we've been tracking.